Hello everyone, my name is Michael Krezetek and today I'm going to be showing you all the work that I've done for this Milestone project. So, my first user story is as the enemy, I want to move quickly towards the player avatar so I can quickly attack the player and potentially kill them. So for that we need to go to the enemy that I worked on, which is the wind enemy. So, the first completion criteria is that the enemy can detect the player and chase them. So for that, we need the enemy to get our sight. So as you can see, while I'm running, it's following me at a high speed, trying to find me. The next completion criteria is that the enemy will have a faster moving speed when chasing the player. So as you can see, with the enemy's patrol pattern, it's moving nice and slow. Once it finds me, it's going to start moving a whole lot faster trying to get me. The next completion criteria is that the enemy melee attack will deal damage to the player avatar. So with this we need to get the enemy to attack us, which with every hit 10 HP is going down, as you can see with the health bar. The next completion criteria is that the enemy loses interest in the player avatar when the player breaks line of sight. So, yet again, we need to get the bat to aggro us and chase us. As it's going, we cut through this wall, and the bat will go back to its original pathing. The next completion criteria is that the health bar is displayed for the players to see. So, once we go inside its radius, we see the little red health bar for us to know how much HP it has. And the next completion criteria is that the enemy can be killed by the player. So this may be a little bit harder with how much HP I got, but let's go. There we go. The enemy has disappeared after I killed it. My next user story is as a player I want to be able to slide and get closer to the enemy faster so I can move around the level faster and close the gap on enemies. The first completion criteria is when the player avatar possesses an air element, the player can activate the slide by pressing the input key. So on the bottom left we see now we have the wind element. So when we press the input key, the player is able to slide on the ground. The next completion criteria is while moving, the player can slide in all of the 4 players' direction. So going forward we could slide, going to the left we could slide, when we go to the right we could slide, and when we go down we could slide. The next completion criteria is the player will not be able to slide through any obstacle within the player's path. So if I want to get to the other side of this wall to get to the earth room, I slide through it, nothing will happen. If I want to go sliding through this door, I can't slide through it. The next completion criteria is that the player can only slide on the ground. So when we try to jump and press the input key, the player is not able to slide anywhere. But once they're on the ground, they're able to slide. The next completion criteria is when the player slides near an enemy, the enemy will take damage. So for this we need to go to an enemy. And right here we're going to slide to it, and you can see the health bar going down. Oh no. Then one more time. My next user story is, as the player, I want to visit the shop within the level so I can spend my currency to upgrade my abilities. One of the completion criteria is that the player can walk within a short range in front of the shop to open the shop. So once we go up here, as you can see, the shop is right over there. Once I get close enough, it will go to the shopkeeper's items. The next completion criteria is that the shop will display all the abilities that the players can purchase. So as you can see, all the abilities over here is what the players can spend their coins on that they find within the level to spend it on. The next completion criteria is that the shop will show the prices for the upgrades. So as we can see on the bottom, we have the prices that the player needs to get the coins to pay for. The next completion criteria is when the player does not have enough coins, they cannot buy any upgrades. So if I want to buy this flamethrower ability for 3 coins, but I only have 2 coins, I will not be able to buy the flamethrower ability, or either the earth wave ability since it's 4 coins. The next completion criteria is when the player has enough coins for an upgrade, they can purchase an upgraded ability. So with only 2 coins, I could either buy the water shield throwing ability or the wind push ability. So once I click it, it's out of the shopkeeper's inventory. The next completion criteria is that when the player presses the exit shop button, the player will be able to move around again. So exit the shop, the player will be able to move around within the level again. Now, I would like to introduce to you the next person, and they will talk about their user stories.
Hello everyone, my name is Chen Yangshu from Team 10 O'Clock Ribbon. Today I'm going to demonstrate all the issues I've worked on the Spring 2. The first issue is Water Enemy Avatar. As an enemy, I want to use my shield ability and attack the player avatar so I can take more damage and do damage to the player avatar. We have to go to the water room to find the water enemy. Completion criteria. The enemy can traverse the level. We can see the enemy is patrolling in a looping. When the enemy detects a player avatar, activate the water shield and chase the player avatar to the attack range. We approach the enemy avatar. When he sees the player, the shield activate and chase the player. The enemy has a shield effect. When he sees the player, he opens the shield and there's a shield effect surrounding him. The enemy has a sound effect when attacking. Yeah, I can hear the sound effect when he's attacking the player. Also, enemy has an animation. He has a walking animation and attacking animation. The next issue I worked on is the water shield. User story. As a water shield, I want to absorb damages doing to my controlling avatar so it can survive the attack. Completion criteria. When the player avatar possesses water elements, the player can activate the water shield by pressing an input key and deactivating the water shield by releasing the input key. On the right bottom corner, we can see the elements right now, it's none. And when we possess the water one, we can see it turn to water. And pressing the input key, the ability kill, it will activate the shield. And releasing the button, it will release the shield. The shield health pool decrease every time the water shield take damages. Okay, we'll try that on enemy attack. Every time it attacks, word shield health bar. The shield collapses after the health of the shield reaches 0 or below. That's the enemy attack. And for a holding ability, when health will go below 0, the shield collapses and automatically deactivated. The shield health starts regenerating health after the shield is deactivated. When it's activated, you can see the health pool is not increasing. And when it's deactivated, after a few seconds, it starts regenerating. Player avatar animations for active and deactivating the water shield. So there's animation to activate the shield and go back to the idle phase. The water shield active sound effect. When we activate it, we can hear the sound effect playing in the background. When it's off, the sound will go away. The shield can bounce projectile while attacks us in the fire room. So the fireman fired the projectile at the player. When we pull out the shield, bounce it back to the avatar and do damage to them. The next issue I worked on is water shield throwing ability. The user story is, as a water shield, I want to be able to throw at the enemy so the player avatar can damage the enemies while they are holding the shield. Completion criteria. When the player had the water shield activate, pressing an input key will throw out the shield. Before we can do that, we have to get the upgrade purchase so we can use this ability in the shop. We get the water element. When the shield is activated, we press the second ability button, E, to fire out the shield. Without activating it, pressing E, the shield won't fire. The shield fires out in the player facing direction. So wherever it's pointing, we'll throw at that location. When the shield collide with the enemy avatar, the shield collapses and the enemy avatar takes damage. I'll try that in the war room. Yeah, when the shield collide with the enemy avatar, they take damage. It shows on their health bar. The shield health bar goes to 0 when throw out the shield. Right now the shield health bar is full, and when we throw it, the bar goes to 0. We have to wait for it to regenerate to fire it. It has sound effect and animations. When we throw it, we can hear a throwing sound and animation of the avatar to play a throwing animation. Just like that. The player can only access the ability after purchasing an upgrade from the shop. Yeah, we already demonstrated that in the beginning, the first one. Let me start again without purchasing the ability. Without the purchasing ability, we hold up the shield, press E, it won't fire. The last issue I worked on is block pushing ability. The user story is, as a player, I would like to use ability I gain from Earth's enemy to be able to push movable blocks around and create paths so I can progress through the level. Completion criteria. When the ability is used, the block will move in the direction that player is pushing. So first we got the Earth element from the Earth's enemy. This is the pushable block. With the ability, you can push it towards the player pushing direction. Sound effect for when the ability is activated. Hold input to keep pushing the block. The player avatar change animations when pushing the block. So player from idling or walking. And when we got the box to its location, we use it to progress the level.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francisco Tepanicato from the team 10 O'Clock Ravens, and today I'm here to showcase and demonstrate the stories that I worked on during this sprint for our game, Ultra Boy Odyssey. So, the very first story that I worked on is KR10-47 titled Fireball Projectile. The user story reads as follows. As a projectile, I want to be on fire so that I can cause damage to the player or enemy avatars as an attack. So let's go ahead and demonstrate the intent of this real quick. So we come over here. So as an attack, it'll cause damage to us. But if we were to launch it at the enemy, it'll cause damage to them as well. And like we can see that it's clearly on fire, and that is the intent met. So the very first completion criteria is, does damage to the player health on collision. So as we saw, when we are hit by the fireball from the enemy, or if we were to even shoot that fireball at ourselves, it causes damage to the player. So it doesn't matter whether it's shot by the enemy or by ourselves. If the fireball comes in contact with the player on collision, it will cause damage. So the next item is, does damage to the enemy health on collision. So as we showed, if I were to shoot the fireball at the enemy, it causes damage to them. But like we showed with us, if we were to dodge and the fireball bounces back at the enemy, it will hurt them as well. So that works both ways. It causes damage to the enemy, and it causes damage to ourselves as well. So the next completion criteria item is, projectile will have a particle effect that shows the projectile is a fireball. So as we showed, you can clearly see that it is a fireball by that particle system attached to that projectile. The next item is, fireball will have sound for when it's fired from the player and the enemy. So when we shoot it, it causes a sound effect, and likewise for when the enemy shoots it, it does a sound effect, so that so there's audible feedback for that projectile. The next thing is that the item has a sound effect for when it hits an object. So that object being us, the enemies, it will play that sound. But not only that, also this object, which is the torch, if it hits the torch, you'll also hear that impact sound. So that is the next completion criteria met. The next item is, when the fireball hits an object that can be lit up, the object will ignite. So for that, we have this unlit torch over here, and if it comes in contact with it, the torch will ignite. So those are the completion criteria met for this this story. and it can successfully be marked as done. So the next story that I worked on is KR10-44 titled The Fire Enemy Avatar. The user story reads as follows. As the enemy, I want to launch a fireball at the player so I can hurt the player and potentially kill them. So as we showed with this same enemy, it launches a fireball at us that'll cause us damage and can potentially kill us and cause us to lose the game. So that's that intent met. The first completion criteria is that the enemy can traverse the level. So as we can see, the enemy has the ability to move about the level. So that is that completion criteria for it met and done. The next one is that the enemy sees the player and will approach to a shooting distance. So if we were to come into this enemy's line of sight, it will see us and it'll approach to a shooting distance before it begins to open fire. So that's that next completion criteria met. The next one is that the enemy will shoot a fireball at the player. So as we saw, after it gets to a shooting distance, it launches that fireball projectile at the player. That's the next one done. The next thing is that the enemy loses interest after distancing themselves from the player. So for instance, if we were to break the line of sight, it loses interest. It goes back to doing its thing and stops chasing the player. So after breaking that line of sight, it's going to lose interest in the player. The next one is that the enemy can be killed by the player. So we can kill the player, whether it be with melee combat or fireballs. It doesn't matter. The player has the capability of killing that enemy avatar. And for the last completion criteria, we're going to go ahead and see this other enemy over here, which has the health bar is displayed for the player to see. So when we get close enough to the player, to the enemy, there is going to be a health bar that appears right above the head of the enemy that we can see, signaling us how much health that enemy has. So we can see that, and that is that completion criteria met, and that is the last one, so we can successfully move this story to done. The next story that I worked on is KR10-52 titled Flamethrower. And the user story reads as follows. As the player, I want to have an upgraded fire ability that works like a flamethrower so I can cause AoE damage. So really quick, if we show this ability, we see that its intent is met. It's a flamethrower that causes AoE damage. So let's go ahead and go through the completion criteria. So the player holds the input button to access this ability. So we hold the input button, and we're able to do this flamethrower ability. The next item is that the player can damage enemies with the flamethrower. So as we showed with the previous one, but we'll show it again here. With that flamethrower, we can cause damage to the enemies. The next thing is the player can light up torches using this ability. So we'll show this one right here. If we hit it with the flamethrower, we can light up the torches as well with that. There's a few more torches in here that we can show it working with really quickly. So there we go. We're able to light up torches using the flamethrower as well. The power works on a gauge that runs out if the ability is held. So as we hold the ability, we can see that the mana depletes. So that's another one. The ability lasts for 5 seconds is the next completion criteria. So if we hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it stops. So you can only use the ability for 5 seconds if you hold it, and no longer than that. So that's that completion criteria met. The next thing is that the ability gauge has a 3-second cooldown to regenerate. So every time that we use it and we lose mana, in order for it to come back, it takes 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So every 3 seconds, it regenerates mana. Alright, so that's the next completion criteria, completely, that can be marked as done. The next thing is that since we were showing that every 3 seconds it does that, if we completely exhaust it, it's going to take 15 seconds for this mana to completely fill up. So I'm not going to count again because it's redundant, but as you can see, every 3 seconds it goes back up. So it takes a total of 15 seconds for the mana gauge to be completely refilled after using the flamethrower ability. So that is the last of the completion criteria met, and this story can be successfully marked as done. The next item that I worked on during this sprint is KR10-36, titled The Lightable Torch. The user story reads as follows. As an object, I want to be placed throughout the area where the player can shoot a fireball projectile at me or the flamethrower to light a fire and illuminate the area around me. So that is the user story for this, and the intent for this story. So as we can see, we have a torch here that can be lightable. So if we shoot a fire projectile at it, it lights up. Or if we were to shoot it with the flamethrower, it also light up. So let's go ahead and demonstrate these completion criteria. So the very first thing is that it's physical object to be seen as a torch. So as we can see clearly, this object is shaped like a torch to give that player that affordance that it's a potential source of light, and we have some that are already lit to drive that idea to the player. So the next thing is when the fireball projectile hits the torch, the fire will light on top. So really quickly, let's we have more torches over here on this side, so let's expose them. So it's when the fireball projectile hits the torch, the fire will light on top. So if we go ahead and shoot this one with the fireball, we can see that it'll light up. So that's another completion criteria done. The next one is when hit by the flamethrower, the torch will ignite. So even if we were to use the flamethrower as well, like we did right there, it will also ignite that fire. So that's the next completion criteria done. And lastly is that the torches will remain lit when ignited. So sorry, as we can see, the fires do not go out, they remain lit as long as we have already hit those torches with either the fireball projectile or the flamethrower. So that's that user story objective met and the completion criteria met. So this story can successfully be marked as done. The very last thing on my list is KR10-50, titled The Wind Push Ability. The user story reads as follows. As the player, I want to use the ability to push enemies around so I can push the danger away from me. So that is that intent for this user story. So that's what this ability does. It does exactly that. It pushes the danger away from us. So we have an enemy that might be approaching us. Use this ability to push them away. So the first completion criteria is within the ability range, the player can press the push input key to push the enemy away from them in the direction they are aiming. So this is the direction we're aiming. We push the input key and it pushes the enemy in that direction. So for instance, from this angle, go ahead and push him in that direction. From this angle, go ahead and use it and push him in that direction. So that's that next completion criteria met. The next one is that a sound plays to provide feedback that the player is using the ability. So every time we use that ability, we have that gust of wind noise right there. That lets the players know they're using the ability. And lastly is that there's a particle effect that provides visual indication of what direction the ability is pushing in. So like we showed when we were doing that, whatever direction we're aiming in is the direction in which this particle effect will appear, indicating what way this ability is pushing in. We use it here. You see that whatever direction we're aiming at, that's where the particle effect shows, and it indicates us, hey, you're pushing in this direction. So that is that last completion criteria successfully met, and this story can be successfully marked as done. So that being my last story, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. And now I will pass it on to my next teammate. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Nathaniel Olivetti. The first one for the sprint that I'll be going over is the gate and switches. The user story is, as a gate, I want to block the player's path from progression until the switch is activated elsewhere to make the gate lift up. First completion criteria is when the switch is activated, the gate will lift up. They're placed out throughout the world. There's a button for each door. For this particular one, to activate the gate, is to use an input key. For this case, it's going to be the F key. When pressed, the gate lifts up. The second criteria is when the gate is activated, it will animate going upwards vertically. Thus, turn it on, it goes up. The third completion criteria is when the gate is opened, if the switch is pressed with input key, which is the F key. Press an F key every time, opens and closes it. Gate will close on a second press of the button. Is the last completion criteria, which if you press the F button, it opens up. You can go to another one, press the F key, opens. You still go back, press it again for the second time, and they will close. That is it for that one. The next issue is the player melee attack. The user story is, as the player, I want to be able to attack the enemy avatar by punching them so that I can destroy the enemy. First completion criteria is the player can press the input key to use the ability. For this is the left mouse click. Every time it's pressed, you are able to punch. And second completion criteria, when the player's attack hits the enemy, it will lower the enemy's health. Go over to the fire enemy, punch him one time, his health bar above him did go down, punched him again, he dies. The ability can only be used after the animation finishes. So if you try to spam it, this is constantly hitting the mouse click. So when it finishes, you are able then to fire it off again to punch. And that is all the completion criteria for the melee attack. The next issue is the Ultra Hook. The user story for the Ultra Hook is, as a player, I want to steal enemies' elemental abilities so that I can use the abilities in combat and solving puzzles. First completion criteria. The player can press an input key to fire out an Ultra Hook at a certain points aiming that are within range. That is for the grapple hook. If we were to come into this room here, there are points in the map that within distance they will light up. They will light up. Press the input key, which is G, and it will bring you to the point. Next ability, the next criteria is the ability can only be used once the previous ability action has finished or is cancelled. Once you fire it off, it will finish the animation and take you to wherever the point is that you grappled to. It can't be used again, because if you were to press the same key, the G key again, it cancels the ability out, and then you fall from depending on where you're at in the animation. Now you can cancel it and then shoot again. But it is not allowing you to do it while the animation is still in motion. The next completion criteria is when the hook collides with the hooking point, the hook attaches to the point and launches the player towards the hooking point, which is fires, launches you up, sends you to the point, and then retracts back in. When the player releases the input while the hook is attached to the hooking point, the player's avatar will drop down to the ground, which that is, of course, once you cancel out the ability, you will fall from once the ability was cancelled. The second part to the Ultra Hook is also a different input key. The Ultra Hook on a different input will fire a projectile that will fire in the direction of the camera. The right key fires out the same projectile that's on the top of the Ultra Hook, just without the line. And wherever the camera is looked, you will fire. The Ultra Hook on a different input. The next completion criteria is when the projectile hits objects, the items in the world, it will disappear. They'll bounce off once and then disappear. When the projectile hits an enemy avatar, you'll be given the ability for the same element of the enemy hit. If we were to go over here, down at the bottom left hand corner, it tells you that you have no elements as of right now. You hit it, now you have a fire element, which gives you a different ability, which you were no longer able to do before. If we were to walk over here, you have the fire ability now. Shoot. Now you have the water ability. It works for all the enemies. And that is it for that one. The last issue that I have is the updated HUD. As a HUD, the user story is, as a HUD, I want to show the abilities that are currently equipped and show the player their health, coins, and moons, so that they can see what abilities they have and how much health, coins, and moons they have. First completion criteria: when the player gets hit, edge of the screen will flash red. Come over to the fire room. Here's the enemy. Every time the enemy is hit, flashes the red around the screen and then goes away to be ready for the next hit. The next completion criteria: abilities that are currently equipped will be shown in the bottom left corner. The bottom left corner says the element. You have none right now. If we were to come over here and steal his ability, we now have the fire ability. We can use something that we couldn't use before. Come over here, take the water ability. This. Come over here, take his ability. And that allows you to push this, which you couldn't push before. Next completion criteria is show the progress bar for the water enemy shield ability. Over here to that, we have the progress bar that pops up down at the bottom. And if we come over here, the last completion criteria is show the progress bar that shows the enemy's upgraded ability, mana ability is available. Come over here, go up here to upgrade the ability. Inside the shop, flamethrower ability would be for the fire. Up down here, still his ability. If we stole his ability, that will fill back up, and it will also go in. And then at the top left hand corner, you have the coins, your moons. Top right hand corner, you have the health of the player. And that is it for the updated HUD.
Hello, my name is Jackson Plumstead, and this is Project 10 O'Clock Ravens Ultra Boy Odyssey. I'm going to list off my criteria and my issues that I have for my stories first before I get into anything. So, the first issue I had was the Earth enemy avatar. The user story is: as the enemy, I want to shoot spikes up towards the player where they are standing to hurt the player and potentially kill them. Completion criteria: the enemy moves around in its assigned area. The enemy will approach the player when the player is seen. The enemy will attack the player with spikes. The enemy will attack the player from range. The enemy can take damage after the player attacks it. The enemy loses interest after breaking line of sight from the player. The player can be killed, meaning the enemy can be killed by the player, and the health bar is displayed for the player to see for the enemy. So let's go ahead and give this a start. And we start off. Get your coin pickup, get your moon, come up here by pressing G. And let's see. I have to find other coins, so let me go over here. Open this door with F and go up here. Grab these 4 coins. Get to the shop and buy the Earthwave ability. So I can go ahead and show you all of the things that I worked on. So the Earth enemy avatar is in this room, in the Earth room, and as you can see, oh, don't want him to see me yet. He moves around in his assigned area, and he will approach when seen. So that's why I'm hiding right now. And when he does see me, and when he gets close enough, he will attack me with spikes at a range, and I can take damage when I attack it, and it can damage me with its spikes. And it also will lose interest. So I'm going to show all of this. So first, let me show it catching. Oh, okay, and boop, broke its line of sight, and it went back to patrolling. All right, let me show it attacking. Yep. So I'm getting hit by spikes that follow you and spawn. And I can kill it, and it dies. It takes damage, has a health bar, and I gotta push this block, which is another one of my completion criterias, but we'll get to that in a minute. Alright, let me hop up here. Oh. Ah. I gotta get it against the wall. Takes a second. Grab these coins. And I also wanted to show you that, yeah, that is the end of the enemy. Just wanted to show you one more time with the enemy up here. Loses interest, goes back to patrolling, has a health bar, can be hurt by me, and can die by me and also deal me damage. Alright, this is the next story, and that story is ground spikes. The user story is, or the issue, story issue. The user story, as the ground spike, I want to hit the target avatar so that my controlling avatar can do damage to its opponent. Completion criteria. Have physical spikes coming out of the ground in an area in a row, it should say. When the spikes collide with the player avatar, do damage to the player avatar. Have a visual effect when they come out of the ground. When spikes come out, they will stay there for 2 seconds, and then after the 2 seconds, the spikes will disappear into the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and resume. Oh, and get hit immediately. But there's the spikes. They stay. They disappear after 2 seconds. They have a visual effects popping up out of the ground. And they disappear after 2 seconds. And they do deal damage. And if I keep getting hit like this, I will die. So let me go ahead and break his line of sight. And that is it for that. Alright, yep, that is it for the ground spikes. And on to the next one. That next one being the movable block that we showed earlier. Let me get this set up and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and take care of this guy, actually. So when you have the earth element ability, and when you use your ball to capture it, you can start pushing this block. It moves in all directions and can be pushed. It just takes a long time to do it. And the completion criteria for this is blocks. Oh, and the user story. As the movable block, I want the ability to be pushed by the player avatar to help them get over ledges that they would normally not be able to get over. The completion criteria are blocks are placed throughout the level. Blocks cannot be pushed if the player does not have the proper ability. Blocks become pushed when the player has the proper ability, and they can be used to solve puzzles in a level. So the first puzzle that we have here is just a simple push the block and get to the point to where you can climb up here without being blocked by anything. So once you push this block here, you pop up and you can get up. And I'm going to show you that without the proper ability, you can't push that block. There it is. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. See, without the earth ability, element none, I cannot push the block. So you need that earth ability, which I can't get because now he's dead. And that's it for that one, and we'll move. And the next and final story I have is the Earth Wave. User story: as the player, I want to use the Earth element to attack enemies that can surround me with a shockwave of spikes that deal damage. Completion criteria: when the ability is activated, the player will send out a shockwave followed by spikes. Spikes will spread out in all directions. Spikes will deal damage to the enemies, and a visual and audio feedback will be played when the spike ability is activated. For this, I'm going to go into the wind room, and I'm going to use my ability. And that is it. It deals damage, and it has a visual and audio feedback. Let me do it one more time before this thing kills me. And that is it. Let me check and see if I covered all my bases. Yep, that is it. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.